6 to 8 trucks will be transporting 200 pounds of uranium ore daily. Navajo Nation had already banned the transportation of uranium in 2012, and this came after our people, land, and water were completely poisoned and devastated by uranium mining. Over 500 uranium mines were needed to supply the United States with nuclear weapons. These mines were abandoned and never properly sealed because they're on tribal lands, so they were just left to seep radiation into our groundwater and into our soil. That same lack of care and upkeep led to the church rock spill that dumped so much radioactive waste into one of the rivers in Navajo Nation. Cancer, heart disease, and organ failure tore through Navajo Nation. Babies being born today are still being born with elevated radiation levels. And now, for the first time in years, trucks are transporting uranium through Navajo Nation, allegedly covering it with nothing but a tarp.
Now, this was happening over the summer of 2024, and I bet you never heard about it, because I didn't hear about it even until recently. Now, this happened. They transported the trucks full of uranium ore, incredibly poisonous, with just tarps to cover the top. And if you've ever seen a large truck, a semi-truck, move and it bounces, it's just spilling out over the top, just getting into the air, the ground, seeping into the ground, getting into the water. You name it, it's happening, especially when it's covered by a measly little tarp. Now, it was just a few days ago that they reached an agreement for all future transportation through Navajo Nation. But before that, maybe let's get into why this was so terrible, why you probably didn't hear about it, and the history behind uranium ore and its poisoning of Native Americans ever since we got here.
Of Paradise was less than half a mile from 22 million tons of uranium waste. From World War II through the Cold War, uranium ore was heavily mined across the Four Corners region of Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico to produce nuclear weapons and energy. Chemicals were used to extract and mill the uranium, and the waste was put into tailings piles, many of which were unlined and uncapped.
Massive piles of uranium waste like this one in northwest New Mexico have continued to blow and leak contamination into surrounding communities. Infrastructure from 3 decades of uranium mining has left a toxic legacy throughout the Southwest.
Maggie Billaman is a member of the Navajo Nation. Not only her house, but much of her native land has borne the brunt of America's toxic waste legacy. More than 500 abandoned uranium mines pockmark the Navajo Nation, nearly all within a mile of a water source, and there are far higher levels of cancer among her people than the general population. Maggie's own father, a Navajo code talker during World War II, died of stomach cancer. She believes due to nuclear testing in neighboring Nevada.
Now, the side effects caused by prolonged exposure to uranium, say from being leached into your water supply for generations of individuals who've had prolonged exposure due to the infected water supply being passed down to their children, things like that. It can cause autoimmune disorders, high blood pressure. It can cause reproductive issues, multiple cancers, kidney disease, you name it. Uranium exposure causes it. Not only in World War II did we make a huge mess of the Navajo Nation and then leave it without cleaning it up for it to poison these people for generations, but now in 2024 and 2025, we're carting truckloads of uranium through Navajo Nation to further increase the poisoning with no regulations, with no safety concerns, because who cares? Native Americans, they've never been people to us. The only reason anyone knows anything about the fact that this is happening is because the president of the Navajo Nation stopped these trucks and then threatened to stop future trucks from coming through unless they resolved the issue. And then a few, just a handful of individuals made TikToks about this topic. That's it. Did you see any media coverage? Because I didn't see any media coverage, because the media doesn't care, because they don't see them as real people, because they're not white.
There are 10 trucks of uranium that are going to illegally drive through Navajo Indigenous land, and the Navajo chief has called for everybody to help stop these trucks. He's even called for the police, and the police did nothing, and are still letting these 10 trucks that are covered only by tarps. The trucks are covered by tarps at the top. So I have a CDL. I'm a truck driver. When you drive on trucks, these trucks are always moving. So when you're bouncing up and down, this uranium is falling out of these trucks, and it is poisoning these indigenous people's land. It poisons all of the water. It is highly toxic to the environment, and it is illegal.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Clearly, efforts must have been made since World War II to clean up the uranium poisoning that's happening on Navajo land. And you know what? You're right. You're so right. Do you want to know when that cleanup started? January 8th, 2025. And as this Albuquerque Journal article states, this is the start of a very long cleanup process. And it probably doesn't help that we're still transporting trucks of uranium through their land. I'm not a scientist, but I would imagine it's probably not helpful. Now, just a few days ago, in relation to these trucks, an agreement was reached between the company transporting the trucks and the Navajo or the Diné tribe. You know what? I didn't want to say Diné tribe because I figured people would get confused. But if you're this far into the video, then you probably care. It's not actually Navajo. They're actually the Diné tribe. Navajo was a term given to them by colonizers, and it comes from a Spanish word that means thief. So from henceforth, I'll refer to them as the Diné tribe because that is their name. So an agreement was reached between the company and the Diné tribe for future transport of these trucks. So we will still be transporting uranium through their land. However, we've reached, an understanding. Transportation will only be on specified routes and hours of the day. No transport on their celebrations or public event days. Emergency response procedures must be followed. They must have a far advanced notice that these trucks are going to be coming through. And they have to use state-of-the-art covers on top of the trucks instead of just the measly little tarps that they had used before. Now, this is all according to the Salt Lake Tribune, which was the only media source I could find covering this issue that wasn't directly from the Diné tribe. So, love that amount of coverage, and I hope that I can bring some light to this. I can inform some people, because this is what America is founded on. This is what we do to others. People who aren't white, people who aren't straight, people who don't just speak English, anyone who's a little bit different. We use them, we abuse them, and now we have ICE rounding up Indigenous Americans because apparently their birthright citizenship is no longer allegedly enough. So just one hit right after the other with us, isn't it? Anyway, something that shouldn't need to be said, but apparently needs to be said in this day and age or in this country. Indigenous Americans are people too. And you should care about what happens to them, because we are all the same. They are us, and we are them, and they are our neighbors, and we should care that they're constantly being attacked by various members of the U.S. government or this capitalist system. You should care, because they are you.